I think I would make a terrible architect because I'm so in love with the facade and detailing and sketching. Sketching is really what got me into facade design and working with, within an engineering practice. In simple terms, that the facade of a building is, the reason it's important is there's filtering the exterior environment to the interior. So it's about the levels of daylight control and the amount of solar energy that's coming into a building. If it's all glass, that gets into trouble. It's also about having someone on the team that can understand the durability of materials and the processes used to construct facades. And so we're just part of the design team, helping execute an architect's vision.
Welcome to Behind the Design, a podcast where we unfold the details behind the designs we know and love and explore how each project comes to life. I am Camilla Ingle, owner of Unfolded, an interior design and styling studio. In this podcast series, we dive into the details with our industry experts, covering topics such as the creative process, latest design trends, and how we, as an industry, work together to meet the brief and overcome challenges. Let the conversation begin.
Welcome back to Behind the Design. I'm your host, Camilla Ingle, designer, founder of Unfolded, and someone who loves exploring not just the spaces we create, but the people and processes behind them. Today, I'm joined by Troy Donovan, principal facade designer at Prism Facades. Troy has worked in Australia, New Zealand, and New York, and now leads a team of 13, delivering some of the most technically challenging facades in the country. What I love about this chat is that we'll cover not only the science of facades, but also the story of Troy's journey from Central Coast beginnings to global experience, and what it really takes to build a niche design practice. Something I often notice in my own projects at Unfolded is how much a building's skin shapes the way we feel inside it. Facades are often thought of as technical, but they're also deeply emotional, dictating light, scale, and how we experience space. I'm really curious to hear how Troy bridges that technical-emotional divide in his work. Troy, thank you for coming on Behind the Design.
You're welcome.
It's good to have you.
Thanks for the invite.
Pleasure.
It's always great just to talk design, and the building industry is so interesting and varied that there's so many different characters involved.
Absolutely. Unpack it all together. And so you and I both grew up on the Central Coast.
Mum was a nurse in Gosford and I was born there, and Dad had built a house and had my formative, I wouldn't say formative, probably until about 6 years old, moved within Australia at that point. And then when I was 10 years old, we moved to NZ. Mm-hmm. Someone had to reverse the flow of Kiwis at that point in the early 80s. It was pretty intense.
Yeah.
But one way.
If you go back to, you were in Australia, in New Zealand, you then went through primary school, high school, into uni in New Zealand.
Yep. Studied architecture in Wellington.
Yep.
But originally went there to study design.
Okay.
With the intention of doing industrial design.
Yeah.
So in New Zealand, within landscape, interior architecture and industrial design, you do a shared first year. Mm-hmm. And then from that, you apply for the different schools within the School of Architecture and Design in Wellington. And so it was always, my intent was to do industrial design. And I got into this first year and realized, wow, I'll probably be married and have a kid by the time this degree is over. So I went to uni pretty like at 25, and I saw these amazing designers coming out of it, and they were doing two things. They were gapping it to Europe, and I thought that's probably not going to happen, or they were living like a student for the next 10 years, but building their own furniture company. I don't think I've got it in me. So that's with the exposure to all of the architectural tutors that were working within the School of Design, I thought, okay, shit, maybe I can do this. Mm-hmm. So I was doing well, and that enabled me to jump over to the School of Architecture, even though I didn't have the high school education to warrant an entry in the back door.
And is that because you can do that in your 20s though, can't you? Because when you come straight out of school, you've got to have
That's right.
for me, it was UAI. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, I was not even close to that. But yeah, in New Zealand, I think it was maybe 22. You could just apply directly and write a letter that has life skills written in it somewhere, and
No way.
and or world experience or something like that. And yeah, they sort of gave me a chance to first year, and then eventually got into architecture and industrial design, and just made that choice to. I felt that it would be more rewarding to design a house for a single family than a razor for 40 million people. But I think I still love industrial design and that real deep understanding of materials and processes and how things get made. Industrial designers are brilliant at. That's their sort of bread and butter, really understanding manufacturing. And I think architects or other designers that have that interest can bring that into their work easily. It's just having that keenness to learn and find out how things are really put together.
And so then with architecture, so that was what, 5 years?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. And then that led you into facade design.
So I took a traditional sort of approach, and while I was studying, I worked for a Wellington-based architect, and that was brilliant. You could work a couple of days a week and fit that in easily within your uni. But then school holidays rocked around and I was just straight into full-time work. And so I worked with a firm called Craig Moller in Wellington. And then the sort of step into facades happened a little bit slower, but it really came through those very first sort of projects. Then working on a museum exhibition at Te Papa, the National Museum, designing a large glass interactive floor, so detailing glass and steel. It's really that cool thing about architecture and design is you build up this resume, and slowly by slowly a bit of expertise. And the quicker the projects happen, the quicker you build that. So it got to the point where I had enough sort of work through one of my university tutors and someone I worked with, Nick. I had his recommendation to his old firm that this would be a viable, a great candidate. So I applied for a job in New York. And at the time, my wife was like, okay, if you can make New York happen, we'll go. And then
No pressure.
No pressure, and get a job offer. And she was like, I didn't really think this was gonna. So we turned up in New York married with a 10-month-old baby, and a couple of suitcases, and I can't remember, a Phil and Ted stroller.
Oh, wow.
It was nuts. That path led into facade design and sort of building up some early expertise in that area.
Wow. And so, you and I had this chat probably a month or two ago now, where the facade is, the skin of the design. So tell me a little bit more about that in terms of not just the architecture, but the materials that you work with.
Initially, it's not, the facade isn't my design. I'm a collaborator in the design process. So I would work with an architect on their vision and their building and their project. And it would be to help select the materials and the details of the exterior of the building. So it's not really a step away from architecture. It's still architectural design of the outside of the building. But man, I would just start yawning when it came to talking about the lifts and all the other things that architects have to deal with so much.
Yeah.
And so
There's a lot of consultants that they work with as well.
That's right.
Yeah, structural and...
And there's such a broad range of things they have to be on top of. And when I worked in architectural practice, that stuff just bored me to tears. And, I think I would make a terrible architect, but because I'm so in love with the facade and detailing and sketching. Sketching is really what got me into facade design and working with, within an engineering practice. In simple terms, that the facade of a building is, the reason it's important is it's filtering the exterior environment to the interior. So it's about the levels of daylight control and the amount of solar energy that's coming into a building. If it's all glass, that gets into trouble. And it's also about having someone on the team that can understand the durability of materials and the processes used to construct facades. And so we're just part of the design team, helping execute an architect's vision.
Do you ever initiate designs, or is it more the architect would come to you as Prism Facades, or
That's right. They initiate.
Yeah.
The project has probably already gone through some early concept phases. In some instances, it might be a City of Sydney design competition for a large commercial project or a tower, and so we might be involved in the competition phase, and that's where ideas are still floating around. The concept of the building's not even set yet, and you're at the table helping suggest ideas for appropriate design moves, and often it's around just trying to simplify things. And I'm really fascinated by the elegance in detailing. And so my favorite thing is when you see a building from maybe the sky, you're coming over the Harbour Bridge and you're like, oh, that's new. And so there's this silhouette that's fascinating. And then as you get closer to the building, it starts to reveal itself and what the main materials are. And then as you get closer again, it's how things are connected. So my general sort of design sensibility is to simplify as much as possible, but then put that effort into real elegant elements within the facade. So an example might be the vision might be to use terracotta, but then we'd be having a design conversation. Hey, it's not that expensive to change the extrusions, the dyes that manufacture the extruded terracotta. So why don't we shape it put a texture in it, or make it directional so that in the afternoon the same material looks completely different than it did in the morning because of how light is falling across the facade. Or in my sketches, I always it's all bullshit, but I don't figure this out. I just intuitively draw shadows on
of what could be,
of what might be, and then help introduce the idea that maybe some depth and materials to capture shadow is interesting rather than having everything glass.
Does all of this come so naturally to you?
I think it has probably become more natural over our project experience. And the really great thing about our field is an architect may work on one project. A project architect could work on a building for 5 years, and then it gets finished and they get to go on holiday and then they start again. Whereas as a facade designer, I might have 10 to 15 projects a year. And so you build up this experience very, very quickly early on in your career. I think that's what it might feel like it's coming naturally, but it's based on and sort of that intense project experience. How do people get into my position? It used to be, I'm paraphrasing, a grey-haired architect that's got all this experience that might be a bit curmudgeonly, but has got so much experience that they can then become a facade consultant because of that decades of experience. But I think by being able to draw, I was able to used as a tool within an engineering practice to communicate to architects. And so I used to call myself the translator between our clients and the engineering team, that it was the drawing that was helping convey those engineering ideas to an architect. And then, it also works the other way back. Hey, the client really wants to see this happening so can we engineer that? So it's that ability to draw in 3D that would help sort of bridge between architecture and engineering.
I have a question around what type of client would be your typical client, in the way of, because the way I'm hearing you describe this, I think of the average person going, oh, I want a really cool building. Can you help me create this? But even if it was me and I'm in the industry, I wouldn't even know where to start with the materials that you might know to use. What would the brief be?
I'm not sure about typical, but can I tell you what my ideal client would be?
Go for it.
It would be an architect that I already know.
Yeah.
And they will say, we'll meet and hey, we've got this project, and they'll explain the purpose of the project and the maybe the idea behind their vision or concept for it. It's all on collaboration. It's just flowing, not scared to,
Put it all out there.
put out shit ideas, crazy ideas. And then because it's a client I already know, it's easy to suggest wild things that you might not to a more conservative architect, or I would say it's when you really understand what gets them excited and helping just realize that possibility. So a really simple example of that might be a glass tower, but there's some folded geometry. Imagine a glass tower that's more crystalline than it is a glass box, so it's crystalline. So it would be then figuring out the way in which we accommodate that geometry, and it might be a project that has virtually no budget. So you're using off-the-shelf things, but creating modifications that enable this changes in geometry to occur without it being completely custom. And then the other side of the spectrum is you're inventing shit. You're like creating new ways, or not new ways, but you're taking existing processes for extruding terracotta, or an industrial process that might be used in the manufacture of aircraft and trains to help curve aluminium so that it's flawless rather than old more conventional ways of manufacturing.
Okay, so in all of this, you're a partner at Prism Facades, and there's 5 of you, and all 5 of you would collaborate on every project, or?
I'm usually collaborating with one or more of the team, because I tend to be more upfront in a project and then tend to step back when it gets into construction. But so what a client would see is a partner leading a project all the way from start to finish, supported by our staff. And so with the other partners, I might be involved for a very short portion, just post-competition, getting it into concept. And once the approach to the building is established, I might step back at that point. Others are my own projects that I'll see through to construction, but I'm not an engineer. And so I always need that support from either our engineering staff or the other partners that are engineers.
Hence that collaborative, like what you're saying, because everyone sort of sounds like they're in their own lane, but you're all joining forces.
Definitely.
With your skill sets.
Yeah. And out of the 5, there's 3 engineers, 1 partner with a lot of engineering training, and then I have an architectural background.
And different experience sets, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you all worked in different parts of the world and are from different parts of the world.
Like now, how much are you traveling? Are you still doing international work, or do you do it from Sydney? So from New Zealand, from Wellington?
So all of our projects are, all bar one current projects are in Australia, and our projects are located in Sydney, Melbourne, and then they start to taper off. So there's some in Brisbane, and then throughout Queensland, and then occasionally projects in Perth. Quite a few in Adelaide. So that sort of ebbs and flows as projects are being built there. We get brought on board, and so now I work remotely, living in New Zealand with the family, and we have a small project in Auckland.
I'm just thinking about somewhere like Adelaide, for example. If we go back to maybe a design process of a job that is an existing dwelling. So Adelaide, I've been there only once. It's quite old worldly, everything's quite old school, but it's all very beautiful. And would you typically, like if someone was to say, or a client or an architect says, hey, we're redoing this building, are there certain parameters that you need to kind of adhere to? For us, sometimes with a heritage building or a federation home, we're not allowed to change everything on the exterior front. So I'm curious as to how that would work with something like what you're doing.
Absolutely. If it was a heritage project, there may even be a heritage architect involved, sort of adjacent to the design team. And so when we're making connections to that, it would, there's a lot of discussion about the extent of interaction. So An example would be at the Australian War Memorial. There's the original memorial and all of its stone facade, and connecting glass extension and galleries and copper-clad galleries to that. And that point at which they connect, there'll be a glass box touching the original stone, but with a gap. And then there's discussions about what material is in that gap. So that project,
Just to get it across the line, kind of thing.
yeah, because it would be best for the project that we cut that stone and make a weather-tight connection there, so that no water ever comes through. Yes, but
Or wind or anything
that's right, yeah.
going to disrupt the build.
Yeah, that doesn't outweigh the heritage, the negatives from a heritage point of view. We want, the intent there was to be able to say this facade changes or the needs change, that you could undo that work and you would never know that we were even there. Another fun one is at the Opera House, working with Grimshaw Architects on a new...
I haven't heard about them in ages. Yes, I remember.
Maybe we should cut
Grimshaw.
that a bit.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
So I worked there for a little while.
Sydney-based architect. Or
Yes.
Melbourne-based?
So Grimshaw have an office in Melbourne and Sydney.
Yes, right, yeah.
And so there was a whole lot of renewal projects happening at the Opera House. All of them are complete now. But there was a need to create a new balustrade system for inside the Opera House. And so because all of these three projects were needing architectural bronze metal, it was decided that one architect would design the barrier system, handrail system for throughout the Opera House, and then the other architects would have to use that, which is complex in its own right. And so Prism, we engineered the balustrade system and helped with the material and processing and how the connections and everything would be made. So that design was then tested or manufactured, tested, and then deployed across these projects at the Opera House. And it was such great feedback. The first portion of work was opened up, and there's a little hallway that had been created under or adjacent to one of the theatres. It was a way of getting you from a hallway through a little corridor to a lift. Right. And so there was a handrail involved, some bronze. And some of the staff thought it had always been there. They didn't even realize that was the new work. So some of the projects are modern interpretations of heritage elements, making them new again or making them perform better, with the goal of no one ever knowing we even did the work. Those are the ones that's really rewarding when you stand back and you think, which part did we do?
Yeah, it's like you can't pick the reno.
Yeah.
Which part of the house has been renovated? Where's the extension?
Or TZG create a glass elevator coming up through the facade, and then it looks original. That's fun when you can have that, when the desire there is to have no intervention at all, but you've got to upgrade this building and make it more accessible. So now there's parts of the Opera House that people in a wheelchair or people with any sort of accessibility issues can get to, that they've never been able to get to these amazing spaces with it. Good. Looking out over the harbour, it's stunning.
That's so good.
But you had to be able to climb stairs to get there, and now everyone can get there.
How good. That even just that's rewarding, right? Knowing that you've created a space where, accessibility, and it also looks cool. And no one even noticed the difference. That's such a win. This episode is brought to you by Unfolded, my interior design studio. From first homes to family renovations, we create spaces that are functional, stylish, and deeply personal. You can see more at unfolded.com.au. So your Instagram, when I was first introduced to what you were doing, and then you and I caught up, but I had a look, and there are just so many examples of what you do. And obviously you live and breathe this. It's just beautiful. I looked at the images and I was like, I just want to pick his brain. I want to learn more about this. And so, so tell me a little bit about, you obviously share all of that on your Instagram. Is that the only platform?
I have a personal hatred for LinkedIn just because of how people talk on it. The appeal to Instagram when it first came out to me was I had friends living in New York or working at Nike and other places around the world, and I didn't care about their relationship status. I just wanted to see what they were doing at work or the cool stuff they were seeing.
Yeah.
And so that was really the initial appeal. And then I was working on Sydney Light Rail as a stop designer for the CBD stops. I was working with Grimshaw at the time, and we were selecting materials for the canopies and how the stop would work in as part of George Street rather than, a rail network sort of. It has to be part of the street, right? So there's lots of detailing and going on, but there's also lots of conversation about manhole covers and just stuff that makes you yawn. So while that was happening, I would just be sketching in a moleskin, how something might work on the project, or how the canopies were detailed, or how you might get a ladder up to the top. So that sort of stuff. And so I started posting that. And it was that insight into how things are detailed that sort of got a little bit of traction. But where it really took off was when I started posting a photo and the detail of a building. And it made it very...
A
photo of the building.
Okay. And the detail of the building.
And you know what rocks is when you've got a pitched roof and then you've got a section on one half and the photo of the house on the other half, that sort of... And it made it a lot easier for people to understand, okay, I can see that happening in the actual materials, and then look across the screen to what was actually happening, the invisible part of the building. And so that's what... I should say they're not all my projects, 5,000 posts, that would be a massive, you wouldn't get any sleep. So they're not all my projects. So I seek out the, beautiful details and cool projects, but many of them are my own work. And so I had already worked as a facade consultant. So I had this stack of hand traced details that were just fodder. So every morning I would just grab one out, take a photo on the way. And then on the way to work, I was on the train, I'd just create a post. And it was that sort of willingness or that keenness to share and show, not necessarily what I know, but just what I can find. And that sort of create a tutorial investigation, finding a cool project, and then an insight into how it goes together.
You mentioned about launching an online course, primarily for the European market?
It's for anyone really. And I've just completed that to sort of a beta course. So the first sort of test, and it was timed to suit Australian, New Zealand and American time zone. But coming up, I'll be doing one to suit a European time zone.
Okay.
And so it's live. It's not one-on-one. It's Troy and whoever turns up. And it's taking a different approach to explaining to architects or showing architects how I detail facades and how facades work. And so there's a very engineering approach to this. It's science-based, and it's, okay, the water gets in this way, and these are the way that facades can break down. And I find that just boring. And so I've taken a different approach. So in the first week, we'll look at how do brick walls work. Next week, how do windows work? How do different glass facades work? Okay. How is terracotta detailed and manufactured? And so it's all touching on all of the principles of how you keep a building waterproof, but making it more engaging. And you might not have the details on how a building works, but if you stand back and look for some key things in a brick facade, you might be able to then create that sketch or that detail on your own by looking for the clues that have been left behind.
And where did this stem from? Did you think of this yourself and, hey, I'd love to share this with an audience who might be interested in learning? Or
I think it originally came from friends in a loving way, seeing an Instagram with some numbers and saying, you should do this and you should do that.
Yeah,
and
use the platform for good use, for example.
To start with, it's like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And then it got so frustrating. I just needed to do something to sort of formalize expertise or share that some knowledge in a more formal way rather than just an Instagram post, because it's very easy to scroll past and not see the key message or the key takeaway that you could learn. So by being able to have a live sort of, it's more of a lecture where people can ask questions.
Yeah.
But we break down details, and it's, in some cases, I don't know how that architect and design team did it. It's my speculative detail of how I might approach it. And that way it's, I might not necessarily understand exactly what's happening in that climate or for metal-clad buildings in New York, but it's sort of my intuition for how it might go together. And what I think the students that joined it got out of it was, okay, I can analyze by taking photos and then sort of breaking that down and maybe creating a sketch. So I give the students all my sketches that are done on the iPad, so they can pull apart and see the mistakes that I've made. And so I just really love sharing that information and making it way more accessible and digestible, I think.
I love that. I think it's so important, I don't want to digress too much, but just from what you're saying, the way the schooling system, the way the university system is going, has been a pretty hot topic amongst a lot of my community, particularly my friends who are mums, because the traditional schooling way is getting a little bit, hey, is this the right way to do academic, things like that. And it kind of makes me think, when you say, oh, I've got experience in this, I'm now sharing that, including all the mistakes. That is a brilliant way to learn something, because it also teaches the listener, the student, to go, it's okay if I make mistakes.
It's really important.
Look at Troy, look at where he's at now, and he still might make a mistake here or there, but then look at what he's achieving and not being a perfectionist as well. So yeah, that's kind of what I took from what you've just shared.
Yeah, well, having a freshly minted 18-year-old daughter, she's just turned 18.
Yeah.
I'm just so glad that her educational journey is sort of really rocketed. She's struggled and then now she had a few friends, and it's amazing the turnaround, seeing this kid, and it's like, oh shit, that's so encouraging. Like, and I would say at the same age, I had no idea. Like, we were in the car the other day and my son goes, what happens in year 13? And everyone laughs, and they asked Dad, because I repeated my last year of high school because I was such a dumbass. And I had where to go. And I'd fucked it up so bad that there was still room for me to stay and try and finish it. Where my daughter Ruby is at, 6 years ahead of where I was, I just sort of didn't really think university was an option until I met, my wife. And she was the one that encouraged me and made sure that I got the application in on time, because I wouldn't have if it was up to me. I wish people would share mistakes more often. And, my first big F up in design, it was real materials had been ordered and had been made. And it was a really fun, a beautiful little building in Long Island in New York called SUNY University. So a gentleman that had made millions donated $60 million back to community college that he had worked at.
Love that.
To create this center for advanced physics and mathematics. And so the building was glass, and it had these sunshades that stuck out and all these louvers that would, shade the glass facade. And so there's these bits of metal that stick out of the facade to support that. And I was responsible for designing this thing, and I drew the outline, and it got sent off and manufactured. And I had totally misunderstood this rule in engineering for the placement of holes, how close you can go to the edge of a plate. And it was way too far away, so standard hardware didn't work. And my boss is like, well, come up with a design that fixes the problem, because we're not going to remake that thing to accommodate the off-the-shelf object. We'll take the custom thing that we already have, and we can make a new thing to make that connection. And it was at the time I had my first iPod, and you know the little nubbly thing that connects the.
Oh, yeah. It links it
I
together.
was just holding that. I was like, that's it. And so I just stole that shape. And so we used that shape to make this component, and it worked. And it worked out cheaper than buying the off-the-shelf thing, which was just total news to me. It was a sketch was done. It was given to a machinist, and he made these things out of solid stainless steel. And it saved Troy's ass and his job. And in the end, when it all washed out, it saved money. Wow. But I think don't be scared of the mistakes. And I just wish more people, wouldn't it make great podcast content just for people to come and go, guess what, I screwed up.
Yeah.
But everyone's so reserved. And
I think people just don't, it's a very vulnerable thing to share, right? Oh, I actually didn't do well. I made that mistake. But I think as humans, why are we not allowing that? Like, we're allowed to make mistakes. If you need to then resolve it, or if you need to then rectify it, you do that as a mature adult.
It's way more entertaining than talking about your feelings. Come on.
Totally. Well, it's a real life thing. And I think we all do it. We just don't share enough. Maybe I'll do a mistakes segment.
Okay.
Mistakes only.
Good idea.
And just put that out and see who's interested. And so with Prism Facades then, in your team and as an independent facade designer, what's next for you?
Well, there's no real, currently our big ambition isn't just to grow and take over the world, but I just love that idea of working with new people, but also the existing people, and help, working on projects that are more and more complex and more interesting. So turning the dial on the complexity of projects is really appealing. But then also, as they move on and live in other countries and practice overseas, like going with them and delivering great projects in other parts of the world, but from a Sydney studio. Yeah. And being in, having some projects in New Zealand, love that place.
Yes.
Working with architects there. And some of those opportunities have come from working with Sydney architects that are now practicing in NZ, or with Warren Amani, a New Zealand architecture firm that have a studio in Sydney that we've worked with. And then, our sketches and details get hung up in their Auckland office as examples of what you should expect from a good consultant. And so opportunities have come. That's fun. That's fun. And then so opportunities have come through those relationships.
And that's just why relationships in our industry is so important. And I remember my dad telling me, I think I've said it once before, you're only as good as your last job. And it really stuck with me when I opened Unfolded, because I just thought it's so true. Not only on a referral basis, but just on the basis of you sleep better at night when your clients are just happy. They're content. They're like, you met the brief. We did good. It's such a good feeling.
Was he a builder or in construction at all?
He's actually a pediatrician.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's just as important. Your last job.
That's it. That's it. In the medical industry, it's very important. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation, Troy. It's been so insightful. So thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. I have something for you.
Oh.
Because I love sharing.
Yes.
This is a little sketchbook I made to help. I love drawing in isometric.
Okay.
So you'll be able to create isometric sketches of your
designs,
projects, and show how materials come together. But there's some examples in there.
Oh my.
When my wife said, we need to make something, and I think maybe my daughter as well encouraged this, is...
The brickwork?
Yeah, that's fun.
Oh my. Do you follow Brickworks?
No,
I will send you
I've been to a few of their lectures,
you
and
have?
so
Oh,
Yeah.
I want them on the podcast if they're listening. But keep going, keep going.
And so the idea was, let's make something. So I thought was, let's make my version of a moleskin. And so I would normally have isometric graph paper in behind a piece of moleskin sketchbook, and I'd draw over it, and it would help create sort of an accurate sketch. And so I printed out a whole lot of different grids and dots and things that would help you draw an isometric. And I showed them to my friend Dion, who said, do that one. And so, of course, I just chose the one he liked. And he said to me one day, now, when these are printed, you've got to give them away. Give as many away as you can. And I was like, fuck that, buddy. It's cost $3,500 to print these. I'm selling every one of them. So I was in charge of getting it printed and the design, and my wife was in charge of doing the Shopify thing. And it's been 9 months and we can't figure it out. And I've given so many of them. We've not sold a single one, but plenty get given away, and I love giving them away now.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. So this is all your...
Yeah, the debossing,
Oh
Yep.
my gosh.
An architect friend that was listening to it said, hey, you mentioned that sketching is the process of design.
Absolutely.
And I said, why don't you just call it that? So it's
The process.
process.
Aw,
And you can make it yours.
yeah, I love that. Every time I open it, I'll
Show builders.
very inspired. I know, well, I'll just open this on site very strategically. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's really sweet of you. And yeah, it's been so good having you on. So thank you again. I'm so glad this week worked for us.
Yes, thank you.
Tommy, it's meant to happen. And just before we wrap up, where can people find you?
I am on LinkedIn, but if you message me, it could be 6 months before I get back to you. I check it once a year. My Instagram is the Donnies, _Donnies, DONNIES. And that's where you can reach out and send me a message. And yeah, if you've got a question about facades, that's where you find me.
Love that. Well, thank you again.
Cool, thank you.
If you enjoyed this chat, please follow the show, leave a review, and share it with a friend who loves design. I'm Camilla Ingle, and this has been Behind the Design. Until next time.